Pues muchas gracias por tenerme aquí con ustedes. Mi nombre es Alejandro Arrieta, seré el intérprete de inglés y de español con la Cooperativa Comunitaria de Lenguaje. Y ante nada quiero agradecerle a la ciudad y a todas las personas que están aquí el día de hoy por participar en este aspecto de la justicia del lenguaje. With that in mind, we want everybody to be able to participate in the language of their heart. So for that reason, you won't see this now, but in a moment, you're going to see a globe icon appear on the bottom right-hand side of your screen. After these instructions, you can use that globe icon to select English or Spanish. Unless you're fully bilingual in those languages, feel free to keep it off. But if not, select your language of preference and mute original audio right below that. Vamos a aprender después de estas instrucciones la configuración de interpretación. Entonces van a ver un icono de mundo aparecer en la parte de abajo de su pantalla a mano derecha. Pueden usar ese icono para elegir el inglés o el español, el idioma de su preferencia, y justo abajo poner el audio original en mudo, ya que escuchar ambos idiomas puede ser una confusión o una distracción. If you're using the Zoom app on a cell phone, then you can see the three-dot menu that says more. You can also select your language options there. Si están usando la aplicación de Zoom en su celular, también pueden ver el menú de 3 puntitos que dice más. Ahí también van a poder elegir el idioma de su corazón. Y las instrucciones las mandamos también en los mensajes por si eso les ayuda. And last, the instructions have also been sent in writing in the chat in case that's helpful for anyone to review. Back to you, Chris. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandro. And so I'm going to just talk about, oops, did I go too far? No, I didn't. Great. Okay, so you're here for the Denver Moves West Safer Streets meeting, specifically about Perry, Tennyson, and 7th. And before we start, we just want to say that we really appreciate you joining with the events that happened up in Boulder, and they're kind of disturbing for people. And we just want everyone to know that our thoughts are with the folks in Boulder, with that community, and hope that everything goes well for them. So just wanted to start with that. Housekeeping for virtual meetings. So I was still hearing a little background noise. So if you could mute your microphone, that would be great. That would really help us so everybody can hear and not be distracted. We are really trying to utilize the chat window this evening. So that's how you can have a conversation with us. As we're giving our presentation, we have people monitoring the chat to answer questions they can, to gather your feedback, to also provide questions for us, the presenters, to answer during our question and answer sessions. So that will be the primary way. And we really want to emphasize that because it gives us a couple things. It gives us a way to have a discussion with you that everyone can see and participate in. It also gives us a record of questions so that the ones we didn't get to this evening, that we can make sure we answer as we go forward. Great. And I do want to say we will have 3 Q&A sessions, question and answer sessions this evening. So we will definitely have time to talk about questions. So who are you going to hear from tonight? I should have introduced myself already, so I apologize. My name is Chris Vogelsang, and I'm the consultant project manager for this effort. And we have some Department of Transportation and Infrastructure staff on as well. Our city project manager is Geneva Houghton. You'll be hearing from her quite a bit. Our engineering lead is Michael Kozlow, so he's available here tonight and can answer questions about design or implementation. And our community designer, Gabby Serrato, is on the line as well, and she's very knowledgeable about all the projects going on in your neighborhood and in this area, so she can answer questions there. Also wanted to recognize staff and council members. Torres and Councilwoman Sandoval have staff here tonight and may be here. They are here as well, I believe. We appreciate them taking the time to join our meeting and be a part of this. So what are we going to talk about tonight? So West Denver Safer Streets is a project that is focused on 7 corridors on the west side of Denver, kind of southwest Denver, to improve mobility and safety for the neighborhood and the city. Tonight we're talking about the area highlighted in this orange box kind of on this map. And it's really one corridor, even though it uses 3 streets. It's this Perry-Tennyson corridor. So Perry 7th Tennyson, we were going to get into some details about what's planned there and help you understand where we're moving forward with, or not moving forward with, but how we're moving forward with discussions with you. We had an open house February 11th. I know some of you were able to attend and just kind of give high level information at that point, but now we want to dig into the kind of the nitty gritty. Our schedule for this effort. So like I said, we had our first open house on February 11th to kick off the project. Since then, we've done a lot of gathering information and talking with schools and registered neighborhood organizations as much as possible, and people, and gathering physical data to help us develop some initial concept designs. Concept designs are really how we put our ideas onto paper so that people can see for themselves what is being proposed and give us good feedback. After this meeting tonight, we'll have our input windows open for about 3 to 4 weeks. It's through mid-April, and we'll go through in detail how to give us specific feedback that I know is really important for everyone here. After that time, we would move a concept into design and then into implementation. And right now, our installation timeframe for what we end up deciding on for our design would be in 2022 or 2023. So not that far down the road, which is very fast in Dottie's world, like next year. To give you a sense of what we're going to talk about tonight, so this is a high-level agenda. So first, we're going to go through 6 o'clock. We'll do a quick poll question and give you the tools you need to see the concept designs for yourself and give us feedback. That's a very important part of tonight's meeting. Then after that, we're going to go through the concept designs in 2 pieces. So North Perry Street piece, which is right now is a protected bike lane type of installation, and then the Tennyson 7th, which is a neighborhood bikeway. We'll talk about that. Then we'll talk next steps on how to stay engaged. So with that, I want to turn it over to Julia. We're trying to get a sense of who's here tonight. So go ahead, Julia. And you may be muted.
It's working now. Okay. Sorry. So I'm Julia Walker. I'm a planner with OB Consulting. And so I just want to get a better idea of who's here tonight. We're really grateful for you all being here and participating. Just in a moment, I'll be launching a poll. It's really just asking what your relationship to the area is, if you live on one of the corridors or work, so forth, and which corridor you're most interested in, either Perry or Tennyson. So let me launch this. If you're not joining by mobile through the app or through your computer, you may be having trouble viewing the poll. So feel free to respond in the chat bar, your relationship to the streets and which street, Perry or Tennyson, you're most interested in this evening. And I'll just give a couple of seconds for people to respond.
I'm on my phone. I don't know how to respond.
No worries. If you're on your phone, feel free to email our team after this meeting if you'd like to participate at bikes@denvergov.org if you can't see the chat bar right now. And if you can't see the chat bar and are having trouble viewing the poll, feel free to put it into the chat bar. So
well,
oh, sorry.
I don't know how to use a chat bar on my phone.
Right. So if you're not joining through the, oh, sorry, Chris.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, apologies for that. I think this is really for us to just get a sense of kind of who's here, and just I can ask you quickly, what's your relation? Do you live on a corridor?
Yes, I live at 428 Perry Street.
Great. So we'll record that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Thanks. And yeah, we're going to try. I know everybody. That's fine. I really appreciate you bringing that up. We're going to try to do everything through the chat too, so that we can get through the material. And I know you said the chat's not working for you, so thank you for bringing it to our attention. Julia, why don't we give the results of the poll so far, and we can kind of move in.
Yeah, so I'll close the poll. It looks like a good number of people have answered so far. and I can share with you all. So a large majority of everyone here tonight lives on or near one of the streets. And
Yes.
I would say it's almost 50-50, but majority of people here are interested in Perry. So let me stop sharing the results. And thank you for participating.
Great. Thanks,
Oh,
Julia.
thank you.
Okay, let me close that. Great. Go there. Okay, so yeah, let's move into the next piece of this presentation. So what we really wanted to do this up front to make sure that if you only had a limited amount of time, you knew how to get the information for yourself and give us specific comments about, especially sounds like more than 2/3 of the people on the call live on one of these, on Tennyson or Perry. So you can go in, you can see where your house is, what's in front of it, give us a specific comment about that area. That's great, and that's a great tool for us. So where you need to do that, there's a few ways. The best way for us is through our through a website that we have set up specifically to gather your comments, and you get to that by going to bit.ly/WSS comment. And so that's a kind of a way to shorten a web address. So what you type in is bit.ly/WDSS comment, comment, and that'll take you to a special website that you can see on the right side of this slide, where you can go and dig deep, and we're going to give a tutorial on how to do that in just a second. If that doesn't work for you, if that's not a convenient way for you to give us input, there are other ways that we're open to you as well. So you can send us an email at bikes@denvergov.org. And if you put the subject as West Denver Safer Streets, Perry, or Tennyson, we'll know the right people to get that to and how to get back with you. You can go to our project website and schedule what we call office hours, which is a small group conversation with some project leadership, project team leaders, to talk about your specific input. And our website is at bit.ly/West Denver Safer Streets, all one word. And I'll repeat this again at the end too. Or you can call the project hotline if that's more convenient for you. You can just pick up the phone, call us at 720-865-WEST, and leave a voicemail for us. And we just ask that you be a little patient with us getting back to you. We get a high volume of calls on that hotline, and we will get back to everybody, but sometimes it takes several days to get to the right person and call you back. But we definitely will get back, and we want you to call us if that's the best way for you to reach out. So with that, what we really want to do now is I'm going to have Steph Leonard from my office run us through the input site that you get to at bit.ly/WDSS comment. So I'm going to stop sharing, Steph, and you can take over.
Hi, everyone. My name is Steph Leonard. I am an urban planner with the consultant team. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a browser here, so bear with me. It takes a second. Okay. So I can't see the screen, so if you're having issues, just someone pipe up and let me know. So the website is bit.ly/WDSS comment. And we did put in a couple different variations. So I know all lowercase works. And we also did comments versus comment. So hopefully the bit.ly will work for you. So when you first type that in, it takes you to a general landing page. So again, we have multiple corridors through West Denver Safer Streets. So this page is intended to give background for anyone who's new to the project. We have what we're referring to as, I guess, 8 corridors, because we're splitting up Perry and Tennyson on the site. You can see what the full project extent is, and then it's hard to tell, but we did link to our plans and our project website here. And then we know what people are interested in, so we wanted to make sure the draft concept designs were up close towards the top of the page. So I'll go ahead and keep scrolling through the page and then we'll view a concept design as well. On this main landing page, we also have content from our first public meeting, which was on February 11th. That was, if you weren't able to attend, it was a kickoff meeting for the entire project. And so we have our recordings in English and Spanish here, as well as that frequently asked questions document that we are sharing in the chat. And then just to reiterate what Chris mentioned, these are the various other ways that you can contact the project team. So we have email, the project hotline, and office hours. So I'll go ahead and scroll back up. I'll choose Perry Street. So when you click on that, you get a little more content about the specific corridor. So Perry Street is proposed as a protected bike lane. We describe what a protected bike lane is here, and then directly into the draft concept design. So we provide some instructions on how to use the concept design. One thing that's worth noting is you can choose a language to interpret or have the page translated into. So if English isn't your preferred language, you can change everything up here. If you're viewing from a mobile device, we've gotten feedback that it's a little hard to view this concept that's embedded in the page. So instead, you can click on View Draft Concept Design, and this page allows you to view it a little larger. There's even this feature here to expand it even wider. So that's if you are viewing from a mobile device. We recommend clicking on this red button. But I'll go ahead and walk you through how the site is laid out. The corridors are rather long, so to improve viewing, we have separated them into different sections, so you can choose which sections you're looking for. And we do cover everything, just sometimes the references might seem a little off, just so that we can call the closest cross section. So here we are on West 7th Avenue to West 5th Avenue, so you can choose between corridors here, or you can scroll down and choose next, so you can seamlessly move between the different sections of the corridor. So right now it's zoomed in, maybe to cover the full area, but if you want to see a broader picture of how this segment will work, you can zoom out, kind of see the flow of the corridor, and we have translated all of the content into Spanish on our concepts. And the wonderful thing about this tool is it allows for open comment. So you want to make sure you click on comment, and then you'll get this little plus sign, and say you want to comment on this median island here. This is the pop-up that shows up. We recommend typing in your name so we know who we're getting the feedback from. You can leave your email, it's not required. Email is especially helpful if you have a specific question, so that way we can follow up with you directly. And then you'll put your comment in here. You have to agree to the terms and conditions. And then it helps us to know if you think it's, or if you're classifying your comment as a suggestion or a question. And then you will have to prove that you're not a robot and do the reCAPTCHA before you leave a comment. What's nice is, and I'll show you on another quarter that already has more comments, but this tool also allows you to view everyone else's comments and interact with other commenters. So you can respond directly to comments that other community members have left. And there's also a like and dislike option. Before I show you that, I just want to finish out this page. So if you have a general comment about the corridor, we recommend you leave those here. So maybe it's about the entire span of the Perry Street corridor and not a specific section. And then we also tried to include a few design components so that when you're reading through the concept design, you can understand what that actually would look like. And we've tried to tailor them to the specific concept designs, but if there's something that isn't showing up, but the neighborhood bikeways tend to have even more features. So that's probably your best bet for finding that content. I want to show you a nice feature. So say you wanted to leave comments on multiple, you can just find this drop down here and switch between different corridors. So I'll go ahead and choose a neighborhood bikeway here that already has some comments on it. So you can see on our Virginia concept design, maybe there aren't comments on this yet. We'll choose one that I know has comments. Go to Irving. So Irving was our first meeting. Takes just a second, especially with the Zoom going. All right, so you see these new features. We have these yellow dots that show you all the different comments we've received so far. So you see there's a general comment, and then people have liked and disliked, and then responded as well. So that's nice so that we can see kind of compare how different community members feel about the same thing. Maybe there's a lot of support for one particular comment, and we're hoping to provide an opportunity for more of a conversational approach, given that we are still in a virtual world. All right, so I believe that's a good overview. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. I imagine we've probably got some questions, which we'll answer in our upcoming Q&A.
Yeah, great, Steph. Yeah, I know that seems a little like a lot of information, but we really want you to understand how to go there and how to leave a comment. We think that we can't stand around a map together right now and like really dig in. And so this is the best option we have right now to sort of be able to stand around a virtual map and have a conversation. So appreciate you taking the time to explain that to us, Steph, and hope everybody has a chance to go check that out. So with that, oops, sorry. I am going to pass off to Geneva Hooten, the city project manager, to talk about some high-level items.
Thanks, Chris, and thanks everyone for taking the time this evening to join us. First, I just want to, if you weren't able to join us last month at our first open house, just make sure that we're all kind of on the same page and understanding where some of these corridors came from. So 10 years ago, in 2011, the city completed its first citywide bike plan called Denver Moves Bicycles, which was then updated in 2015. And then these corridors were again selected in Blueprint Denver. And I will actually say that the Perry corridor itself, that used to be all the way through Perry, and then through a lot of community engagement and a lot of what we heard through the West area planning process was that folks were really interested in looking at Tennyson, particularly because of the bridge over the Gulch, because it feels very different as a street. And so that's why this particular alignment is Perry, and then it cuts through on 7th and goes north on Tennyson. The funding is that this was selected by the Denver voters in 2017 as one of the projects that form the Elevate Bond. So that means that these projects are all funded, and while we're working on planning and designing them now, they will all start on construction as soon as next year, which we think is really exciting. Next slide, please. And kind of why we're here and why we're working on this is that throughout the city, it's our goal to move more people more safely and efficiently. And ultimately, we're trying to make it so that people have lots of other options to get around that aren't just relying on their own car. So that means certainly walking, biking, accessing transit, which is really critical, particularly through here. And it just says that we have an opportunity to provide more choices that are really comfortable and that can just entice people out of their cars. And the goal is that we can get there as soon as by 2030. And as part of that, we also understand that in order to really encourage different kinds of trips and for someone to say, you know what, maybe I'm going to leave my car at home today, and instead I'm going to take my bike to the grocery store or to a coffee shop, or my kids can bike to school, is that we know that these kind of bike facilities have to be very, very comfortable. So what you see on this graph is that you have some people who are going to ride no matter what, they're the light blue. And then you have some people who say, I'm never going to ride a bike, and that's okay. And that's that 25%. But in the middle of that, we have about 70% of people who are really interested in riding, but need a more comfortable experience to do that. And we know that the way of creating a more comfortable and high comfort bike facility is by providing protection on streets that have the highest speeds and volumes. And it's by really lowering speeds and volumes on streets that can hold that. So we're going to talk about Perry as a protected bike lane tonight, and then the Tennyson and 7th corridors as neighborhood bikeways. And ultimately, one of the main goals that we have as a city is to improve safety. Denver is a Vision Zero city, meaning that by 2030, only 9 years away, it's our goal to eliminate all serious injuries and fatalities that happen on our streets. And the number one way that we can do that is by mitigating speeds. Speeds are the number one factor that will predict a crash to happen, and it will also predict the severity of that crash. So as we can lower speeds and we can create more high comfort bikeways, it is going to help us as a city move more people in better ways and also improve safety for those who are on our streets, either driving, walking, biking, using mobility devices, or taking transit. And I'm going to hand it back to Steph for some Q&A.
Great, thanks, Geneva. So for this Q&A, we want to really focus in on questions that are related to the high-level projects, as well as any questions that might remain related to the tool that we just showed you. So first, we had a question about on the site that I just showed. There was a question about where they're, how to find the full corridor. So that's something I can answer. And if it would be helpful to open it up again, just let us know in the chat and we can open the page up one more time. But we have uploaded the entire corridor concept, but the easiest way to view it, I think, is when you have the page first loads, you can view through the first PDF and then choose next. So it's kind of like you're seamlessly going through the corridor. And it's just kind of how we ended up cutting the segments there. All right, so we did see a couple questions about, well, one question was about why 14th Avenue isn't being addressed at this time. That is noted as a neighborhood bikeway. So Geneva, I'm hoping this question could go to you and we could talk about kind of the broader build out of Denver Moves Bikes and what that timeline looks like.
Definitely. So 14th Avenue is one of those corridors that is on the citywide bike map. And as of this point, I don't know if there is a funding source to build that out. But just like with all projects across the city, we have different ways of getting them done. One of which is if it was selected and is bond funded. Some projects are done through a capital improvement program, which is updated every year. Other projects we're able to install if they coincide with a paving project. And if we're already going to go in and repave a street, we have the opportunity to install and kind of build out a bike network that way. So for this, Perry, Tennyson, and 7th is an alignment that's funded and we have the opportunity to improve. 14th Avenue just isn't in the scope for what we're talking about tonight or funding.
Great, thank you, Geneva. And then Chris, I think this question might be helpful for you to answer. We've got a question from Jaime. How did voting in favor of bikeways turn into protected bike lanes? So I think it would be helpful to explain kind of our high level process of moving from a concept in the Denver Moves Bikes plan to what we pursue or try to design concepts.
Yeah, thanks, Steph. So, when the citizen-driven kind of planning study was done in 2011 and then updated a couple times and confirmed, what that study did was looked at corridors that would work well for making connections to a lot of destinations that got across busy streets at signals or were through neighborhoods and connected important local destinations. And with very limited information, detail really about block by block and what those streets, how they're laid out, how wide they are, and different things like that. So they had some high level information, but not the level of detail we're at now. And so the process for us is to go, the first thing we do is go and gather information about the streets that were proposed in Denver Moves. So a great example is, this Perry is a great example because we went and collected traffic speeds, traffic volumes, parking information, widths of the streets. So how wide is it from face of curb to face of curb? What are the land uses around there? What does it look like when it crosses busy streets? So we spent a lot of time in the Perry corridor, and a great outcome of that is that we found that certain places, like the street was much narrower than what was assumed in Denver Moves, and really didn't accommodate the kind of use we wanted to, kind of protection we would need. So what we do is we look at the widths and the volumes, and that leads us to what type of facility would be comfortable. And then we look at how to fit that facility in. So I'm going to go through all this in detail for Perry's protected bike lane section in the southern area. But that leads to what you would need to do to make it safe. And then you lay it out to see what that looks like. And then you say, oh, well, what is that? What are the impacts and what are the benefits? And that's where we are right now to have that discussion with you. So that's probably enough on that, since I'm going to be getting into that in a little more detail in just a sec. So maybe Steph, maybe that's enough at this point for questions. And I know people are very anxious to see what we're proposing. So let me keep moving through the presentation, and then we can always circle back again. We have 2 more question and answer sessions, and we'll answer those. So I just wanted to put this slide up one more time in case there were folks that joined us late that didn't hear the Alejandro's direct instructions. So if you have joined and you would like to hear this in Spanish and not English, the instructions are up on the screen. Great. Okay, so let's talk about Perry Street. And so where Perry Street is right now, as I explained, we had a process to kind of go through and say what facility would need to go on a street to make it feel safe. I'm going to talk about that process in a little more detail in a second, but where we ended up was a protected bike lane is what would be required to make Perry Street feel safe for people to use as a bike facility. Those are dedicated bikeways that have horizontal and vertical elements. And so I'm going to show what that would look like in just a second. And this part of Perry we're talking about specifically is from Bayard on the south up to 7th on the north. And so that's the part of Perry that I'm going to be addressing right now. Okay, so what are the, as we go through this, we think about what are the benefits of this project? What does it connect? So this piece of Perry, and the Perry 7th Tennyson corridor really, it connects eventually up to Sloan's Lake Park. It connects to the light rail system. It has Weir Gulch Park. We have to get across 6th Avenue and West Alameda. And we have existing bikeways on 1st and 7th plus the trail system. So this is a pretty important north-south connection in this part of Denver. And so that's one of the reasons why it's being looked at. I said, we went and collected a bunch of information, a bunch of data. And so this is highlights of some of that data we collected. We collected information on speeds, volumes, parking, crashes, and like I said, like physical characteristics as well. So the speeds on Perry vary depending on where you are, but they can be quite high. So as high as 30 miles an hour for cars driving down Perry. And I'm sure you've all seen cars driving faster than that if you live on the corridor. Then the volumes are also on the high end. So we're at 4,000 to 6,000 vehicles a day. And our threshold, just to give you a sense, up on the top right here is a chart that is a good rule of thumb about how we try to select a facility. And we have speed on the bottom, so average speed of cars, and then volume of cars per day. So that's how many cars per day travel along Perry in this section. And this red dot indicates kind of where those two data points lead us. So it's kind of this very top right corner of this greenish area, which is buffered bike lane, protected bike lane interface there. And because of the crash history, which is, there are a lot of crashes in this part of Perry, and 6 bicycle crashes, 1 serious, and 6 pedestrian crashes, 1 serious, and 192 vehicle crashes. So if you live along the street, that it can be a dangerous place to be. That's what sort of pushed us from this spot, which is the bike lane, buffered bike lane, up to the protected bike lane to really get that safety element. Parking utilization. So we did go and measure parking, and I know there's always questions about, well, it's COVID, how does that work? So this part of Perry is very residential in nature, and our standard timeframes for doing parking studies in residential areas is between 5 and 6 a.m. I feel like that's the best time to get the maximum residential parking demand on the street. What we found overall was that this part of Perry had about a 17% occupancy rate. So there were about 1 in 5 parking spaces had a vehicle in it, which in our world is not super high. If it's your car, I'm sure it seems very high and it's really important to you. But that's just what the data led us to here. So I wanted to share that with you. Okay, so that led us to, this should be a protected bike lane based on our engineering criteria and looking at the speeds and volumes and safety. So what does a protected bike lane look like on Perry Street? So this is what we call a typical section, typical cross section. And this is as if you were standing in Perry Street and looking to the north, okay? So let's say you were at First and looking north. We have about 36 feet of total width to work with. So it's like 36 feet wide from face of curb to face of curb. So it's not that wide to begin with. And the way this is laid out is you would have a bike lane on either side of the street, 1 southbound and 1 northbound, with a buffered area, so a paint on the street with these crosshatches, and a vertical element, posts and rubber curbs, which I'll show you kind of how that lays out in a second. And then we'd have 2 travel lanes, just like today, 1 southbound, 1 northbound, but they'd be narrowed up and they'd feel a lot narrower than today. So when you saw that parking occupancy data of 1 in 5 spaces full, what that means is in most places, the street feels 36 feet wide. Feels like there's 18 feet of travel lane. And that encourages people to drive more quickly. And what we're trying to do here is narrow the roadway up to provide protected space for the bicyclists, to get the cars to go a little slower. And then this space is also useful at the cross streets, which I'll show you next, to provide safer pedestrian crossings. Okay, so I picked an example, just one piece of the Perry corridor, just because I wanted to point out, as you go and see the concept designs for yourself, what it is you're looking at and what all these lines mean. Okay, so this is the same section we were looking at before, except for now we're up in the air looking down at the earth. And our concept designs are laid out on top of aerial photos, so you can actually see your house, your cross street, things that you know and care about, you can see on this and kind of orient yourself. I'm going to talk about this piece right here first. So before we were standing in the middle of the street here looking north, and now we're up above. And what you see here is a bike lane on either side, just like I showed in the cross-section view, a travel lane in each direction, so 2 travel lanes, and then this buffered area with the vertical elements on either side. And what the symbols here mean, the little circles are those raised vertical posts that you've seen around town. They're called flex posts, and if they get hit, they bend, but they provide a substantial disincentive for people to sort of drive in that space. And then what the rectangular longer bars here are, those are rubber curbs that are about 8 inches high, and they're intended to fill the space between the posts to create more reason why people wouldn't go into the bike lane and to narrow the street up. You'll see that we've gone to the effort, even at this concept level, of identifying all the driveways. and making sure we aren't putting vertical elements in front of driveways so that you can still have access to your driveway and get in and out. The one thing I wanted to point out at the intersection here was, as we talked about narrowing kind of the roadway up, we're also doing that on the side streets. And so this is at 3rd Avenue. And what's shown here, I know there are a lot of dimensions shown here, and that's important for us engineers to understand how the space works. But the white lines here that you see along the corners are painted stripes to try to create the visual appearance of a narrowed street. And then the black dots are those flex posts again. Those are the vertical elements to create that space, or that to narrow the roadway up visually. And you see we're narrowing these up to 20 feet in this case. And we're also cognizant that there are fire hydrants that need to be accessed. So we haven't put vertical elements in front of those either. But this creates a much shorter crossing distance north-south. And with the protected bike lanes here, the travel lanes are much narrower as well. And that reduces what we call the exposure time. So as pedestrians are out in the street in the same space cars use, the less time they're in that space, the safer it is, and the slower the vehicles are going, the safer it is. So that's a big part of this as well. Okay, I know that everybody, not everybody, but I know a lot of people on the call have questions about parking. And so we thought we'd just try to address or talk about some of that up front, and then we can talk about it more in the Q&A. But so parking, why is parking being removed in this area? So I went through kind of the setup where this is an important corridor to make connections. We have high speeds and volumes, and that leads us to a protected bike lane being the safest facility. The speeds also lead us to the fact that additional pedestrian safety enhancements are needed. So that's what I was showing you at those intersections, trying to get people to be protected and get the cars to go slower. Unfortunately, as I showed you in that cross section, there's only 36 feet of width, right, available. And so you can't get everything in the same space. So what we've shown now is we've laid that concept out, showing it as the protected bike lanes in both directions, because that was the safest bike facility. And unfortunately, what that means is all the on-street parking along Perry itself would need to be removed. Now, the side streets are still available. And I know people say, well, that's inconvenient to go to the sides. But just to point that out, like, we aren't trying to do anything to the side streets. The other thing we get asked is about handicap and accessible spaces. So we've developed a design method where we could keep those spaces on the street in the location they are today and maintain that accessibility. It's sort of a trade-off, but those are important spaces to maintain. So if you have a space like that, it will stay. If you need one, or you think you need one, we're happy to help you apply for the permit and go through that process and point you in the right direction. So if you do need that, please feel free to use the chat or get in touch with us by email, and we can get that rolling for you. Okay, so that's enough. I just kind of wanted to lay out, what is it we're trying to accomplish? What does it look like? So we're all on the same page. We know we're talking about the same things. I think we should take some specific questions now that people have asked. So Steph.
Great, thanks, Chris. So we had a specific, that one's actually probably a little better for the next section. You already touched on this a little, but Chris, we have a question about what style of protective buffer you're looking into. I found the most effective ones are either fully raised or concrete parking block style ones. So Chris, maybe you could provide a little info as to why we're doing the flex posts and rubber curbs, and kind of the longer term vision there.
Okay, yeah, I'll start that, and Geneva can jump in a sort of a programmatic way. But so this is what the West Denver Safer Streets project is trying to do, is to create change quickly and within our budget, right? And so we've included, most of the things that are included are what we call paint and post improvements. And so that would be like striping on the road, flex posts, and these kind of rubberized curb sections. They look a lot like a curb stop you'd see in a parking lot, those concrete pieces, but the rubber ones hold up better, are easier to install, and are more durable. And so that's why we're headed to those elements instead of, say, building out concrete and doing that right away. There's another good reason for that is we have a plan to monitor these corridors after implementation to see how speeds, volumes, and use is changing. And we can then be flexible and adaptable as we move forward. If we find that we are not getting the speeds down as low as we want, or if we're getting areas where our safety isn't what we want, we can make improvements and changes, and it won't be expensive to do that. So that's the main thing. Geneva, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you covered it really well, Chris.
Okay, great. Yeah, and I can't see your face, so thanks for jumping. Okay, Steph, let's take another one.
Great. So we have a couple questions that were somewhat spot specific along Perry, but within the same theme of, we know that Perry has some changes in width as well as alignment. So, there's an offset alignment here or there. So maybe I know the concept designs cover how specifically we're dealing with these areas, but Chris, could you talk to just generally how we approach varying widths, as well as when there's what treatments we install or add to the concept?
Sure. So yeah, the varying widths. So we measured each block, right, block by block by block, to see exactly how wide it is. And unfortunately, none of the blocks are wide enough to do a protected bike lane and have parking. So we get kind of stuck in the same design, no matter if it's 38 feet or 36 feet, right? So that's one thing. We are sensitive to that width, and we're trying to work with that as we go. If the street is a little wider, then that means the buffer would be a little wider. We're trying to keep the travel lanes to 10 feet, and that's really important to get the speeds down and create that slower speed environment. I think the other thing you were talking about is there are some unique situations on South Perry, especially say at 4th, where we have that offset intersection. Quite a few accidents there. It's very confusing. If you're going straight, it kind of looks like you're turning right, and people have to be careful with each other. So as you look at the concept design, we didn't show that as the example right now, but when you get a chance to look, you'll see we've tried to make some improvements at that specific intersection to narrow it up and to make the turning speed slower, and to provide a little more clarity about how to use that space to try to make it safer for everyone, not just the bicyclists, but pedestrians and autos as well. We'd love your comments on that. Please take a look and leave us a comment and let us know if you think that's adequate or needs to be different. But that's a place we paid special attention to. Okay, Steph.
Thanks. And kind of in that same vein, we just got a question in from Jenny about whether we'd considered a bidirectional bike lane on one side and parking on the other, or whether that is possible. So Chris, I think that might be another one for you.
Yeah, sure. So the idea, we've explored a range of concepts here. And so one of the ideas, one of the configurations, I guess I should say, is that say you put the bikes on one side of the street and leave the cars and the parking on the other side. And a couple things. So with the widths we have available, it doesn't leave us enough room anyway to save parking. It only saves a couple feet by configuring that way. So the benefits to maintaining on-street uses weren't there, and the disbenefits of a facility like that. So the challenge is that now you have two-way traffic on one side of the street, and it requires a really careful interactions at the intersections, careful design. It's a non-standard layout in Denver. There aren't any that are laid out like that right now. Broadway is two-way, but it's against a one-way street, and so it's a little different. So anyway, that's why we didn't go there. If we would have seen a benefit, I think, where a curbside use could be maintained, we would definitely consider it, but the benefit just wasn't there, and so the challenges weren't worth it.
Great, thank you.
Are there yeah, let's take one more, and then we can circle back. I want to make sure we get to Tennyson too.
Okay. There's been so many wonderful questions. Let's see, so we did have a question about, let's see. There's one that kind of leads into as a good segue, I think, connecting the two corridors. So why use 7th to connect Perry and Tennyson with the Gulch Trail right there? This would be very steep on the hill on Tennyson between 9th and 10th. Oh, I guess this is more Tennyson, but I guess like how we decided to connect along 7th.
Right.
Perry and Tennyson.
That's probably me too. So I was very involved with laying out the ideas in the engineering way. So we, as you know, if you live in the neighborhood, you know that north of 6th Avenue, Perry changes quite a bit again. It gets narrower. It's only 30 feet wide there. The speeds are very high. The volumes are higher even than they are in the south. And so we looked at options to get off of Perry quickly. We did look at that north frontage road to try to connect over to Tennyson there. It's just way too narrow. And there's not enough space to do a two-way bike connection and leave that open. And that piece is a really important sort of emergency access when 6th Avenue has problems. So we didn't want to mess with that. We didn't want to go further up Perry than 7th to say like 10th, because it's just more blocks of a really narrow section that we can't do anything safe in, or it's hard to. And so what we decided right now, and we'd love your input on the comments, is in that section of Perry between 6th and 7th, between US 6th Frontage Road North and 7th Street or 7th Avenue, is if you know it, you'll know it's downhill heading northbound, right, towards the Gulch. So we've made bikes in that section share the road with cars heading northbound downhill. We think the speeds will match up okay with the stop signs at 6th Avenue. Coming southbound, so up the hill, you have a protected bike lane. So you'll be going much slower, and we didn't feel like that was a safe situation. So that was a compromise in our design to try to make the connection. And then so we wanted to get off Perry as quickly as possible, which is why we looked at 7th. And so if you looked at the concept, you'll see how we try to transition northbound bikers over to 7th. And 7th is a pretty quiet neighborhood street that we feel like we can do some traffic calming elements on and make it feel safe. So that's a lot of detail, and I apologize for going so deep on that, but I know that that area is particularly challenging. And so any feedback or ideas from the community would really be helpful. Okay, Steph, I'm going to go on to the Tennyson section, then we can circle back and answer other questions as well. So let me go to the next piece, and I'm going to pass to Geneva Houghton, our DOTI project manager.
Thanks, Chris. And I also think there was a question or sort of a comment in the chat about why couldn't we do a protected bike lane on one side and a share on the other? And I know Chris was just talking about that, but I also think a really important factor is just how much the safety is a concern. And overall, for that one block, incredibly constrained, we have to make some modifications, but generally, if we have a share condition throughout most of the corridor, we won't be reaching those interested but concerned riders and really reaching the folks that we think want to be riding with their kids or themselves. So I'm now going to transition to a really different facility type, and this is a neighborhood bikeway. And the reason why we can do something like this as a neighborhood bikeway on some streets and not others is based on the speeds and volumes that we see on the street. So a neighborhood bikeway is a shared street where we prioritize people walking and biking. The city doesn't have a ton of these yet, but we will be building more, and you're going to see a lot more installed in the next year or so. If you go up to 35th Avenue in the Highlands, that's an example of a neighborhood bikeway. And so the goal is to really lower speeds, whether that's by adding speed humps and traffic circles and curb extensions and things to mitigate speeds at the intersection where we have most of the conflict points. The goal is, if we have too much volume on the street, to reduce cut-through traffic with a diverter. The photo here on the upper right-hand side is at 35th and Irving in the Highlands. And we won't actually be talking about a diverter tonight because there aren't that much, we don't have a volume problem. but it is one of those tools in the toolbox that we can use. We also try to increase safety at the intersection as needed, whether by adding signal improvements, adding crosswalks, adding rapid flash beacons like pictured. And then ultimately, we also want to increase as much visibility at the intersection as we can. So that's by adding curb extensions and sometimes daylighting and removing just a slight amount of parking at the intersections themselves, so that if you're in a car or you're biking, you can just more easily see everyone there. So these are all of the different tools that we're using for 7th and Tennyson, and we're going to walk through them now. So this corridor, as we've talked about a little bit, this was a corridor that came from the community through the West area planning process. A number of folks said, really take a look at Tennyson. We think that that's a really good street. And so we went out and we did some data collection, and we agree. We think that Tennyson corridor does provide a great north-south option to connect people from Sloan's Lake across Colfax, where it is signalized, connects to an elementary school at Colfax Elementary. It also has the bridge over the park and over the gulch. And so you can use that, you can get to light rail, and then it brings you down, it connects to Martinez Park and to another trail, and then uses 7th to get to Perry. And Perry, as I think we've mentioned this evening, one of the critical reasons why we're using the Perry alignment is because it has the crossing over 6th Avenue. So we know that that's where a bunch of people are funneling in to cross. And I mostly touched on this, but it also provides transit connection, both on 17th Avenue, certainly to the light rail, and to transit on Colfax, as well as other places. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, Chris, thanks. And what does the street look like today? The speeds that we're seeing are between 26 and 29 miles per hour, which is higher than what we want to see for a neighborhood bikeway, but the volumes are much lower. So we're seeing volumes that are as low as 189 cars a day, which is fantastic, and as high as about 1,500. So this for us is in the right realm. It's easy enough to really prioritize people walking and biking on this kind of street. We don't have to do any kind of major diversion or make any really grand changes. It's just sort of turning the dial a bit, improving the street, mitigating speeds as much as we can, and hopefully then prioritizing people who are walking and biking. Next slide, please. So what you'll see on the concept design, if you go to the bit.ly.wdss comment, is that you'll see a number of different strategies applied to the street. So here is one thing that we would like some feedback on. We had the alignment going straight on Tennyson between 16th and 17th to the park, but we've also heard from others that say, you know, to actually get to Sloan's Lake, there is an all-way stop currently at Utica and 17th. That's also one of the main access points to get into the park. So maybe it would make more sense to go to Tennyson and then have people take a left-hand turn and then a quick right-hand turn. So here is one option that we have outlined for what that might look like, but we really do want some feedback on this between Tennyson and Utica, if there is a particular alignment that you think makes more sense and maybe would be more intuitive to you as well. And I will say that on all of the corridors that we will be installing, we will be adding wayfinding to help people get around. So if you're on a street or you're trying to get somewhere, you can use the existing bike network to help yourself navigate. So let's say you're on Tennyson, the wayfinding would direct you on 16th north to the park. And I'll just point out really quickly that one of the options that we have is a traffic circle at 16th and Utica to kind of slow down any turning movements. And then there's already a stop control at 16th. Okay, next slide, please. So a couple of other things that we want to talk about with this corridor, we have it in the design a few speed cushions, which are hoping to slow down speeds mid-block, particularly in that those few blocks just south of Colfax, the blocks are pretty long, and it can be easier for people to pick up speed on longer blocks. So we have a few speed cushions in the concept design. In addition, we have a few median refuge islands, which on the left-hand side. And what this does is it just adds a little bit of friction on the street. So it makes it, you can absolutely still drive and bike across the street, but you tend to slow down a little bit more. And that kind of a treatment we think makes a lot of sense next to a school in particular. Next slide, please. So here is where we're showing the one block that is really, really steep, and I think a couple of folks in the chat panel have talked about this as well. Between 10th Avenue and 9th Avenue, Tennyson is a steep, steep street. And you can see we have some curb extensions going on at 10th and Tennyson to help slow down traffic. And one of the things that we heard when talking to a registered neighborhood organization was folks were saying, look, that hill is really tough for me, and I would feel more comfortable if that were striped out as a bike lane. And this is a fairly common treatment that we can use on streets that do have a lower volume, where we can have a sharrow in one direction and a climbing lane in the other. So for this street alone, we're showing that there would be a half parking removal here to accommodate a climbing lane, but we wouldn't be touching the parking on the other side. So this was based on some community feedback and just saying, in order for me to feel more comfortable on the street, we really would like to have a climbing lane. Next slide, please. So at 7th, Tennyson comes down and then it turns. And in between Tennyson and Perry is where we have several different traffic calming treatments, including traffic circles and curb extensions. So here you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, a curb extension. And the intention here is that it's going to slow some crossing distance. There are already existing valley gutters on the street, which actually provides almost a natural traffic calming because most drivers tend to slow down a little bit when you reach those. So we have traffic calming already in the street built in, and then we'll be adding curb extensions and traffic circles and curb extensions. And so the intention here on 7th Avenue is really, again, to slow down traffic as much as we can to increase safety, particularly to increase safety for people who are wanting to access the parks and the trails and to get there feeling really comfortable. And at 7th and Perry, for this particular intersection, we were trying to figure out a good way to transition people from one to the other. So if you're going northbound, you need to take a left-hand turn. If you're going eastbound to southbound, you need to take a right-hand turn. So what we were trying to do here is to facilitate that turning movement with greater comfort, particularly concerning kind of the volumes of traffic that we have on Perry. So what we're showing here is just a bit of diversion. So it means that someone can't bike or someone can't drive through on 7th Avenue across Perry, but they would just need to be taking right-hand turns. And the other benefit that we're seeing from something like this is it does help mitigate and lower some of the volumes that we do have on 7th Avenue. Next slide, please. Q&A, great.
Super. I'll have Steph, if you can let us know some questions that have been coming through that make sense for us to address at this time, that'd be great.
Great. So Chris, this first one is for you. Jenny asked if there were other streets besides Tennyson that were considered, and if so, what were the study results?
Yeah, let me, I can take a shot at that. So we did look in general at a lot of north-south streets besides Perry in this area, north of 6th Avenue. And the reason we landed on Tennyson was primarily because, well, a couple reasons. It's a pretty low volume street, and we had the crossing over the gulch, and we had a connection up to Colfax Elementary and a traffic signal at Colfax. And those are really important criteria for us to provide a safe facility, and also added a couple more destinations that we really wanted to serve. You know, the other streets kind of that are in this area that run north-south either run into the rail or don't go across the gulch, or they hit Colfax in a place that's difficult to cross. So that's a pretty good summary of why we ended up on Tennyson. And then the data supported that, and the community input also supported us looking at Tennyson.
Great, thank you. So this next one I'll send it to you, Geneva. There was a question about, and you've kind of touched on this already, but will road signs be added to show how the bikeway flows? So, and how are we deciding where to put those?
Sorry, Steph, is this a wayfinding question or, okay, yes. Yep, absolutely. So as these bikeways will be built, one of the very last kind of bows on the cake, bows on the present, whatever, the end of it is that we add in wayfinding. And yes, this is what it looks like. That's our specific neighborhood bikeway wayfinding signage. And this is really to pull people across the city and to direct them to places that have bike facilities and trails. So let's say that you are on the trail and you come off and you want to go to the park. You can use the wayfinding to direct you how to get from there to Sloan's Lake, for instance. So that's the advantage of having wayfinding signage. It's a pretty low, ultimately a fairly low cost way to help people in getting around in other ways and just showing what those options are like.
Thanks for explaining wayfinding for us, Geneva. I did have, this one's a little more general, but I think it will be important for everyone to know. We had a question about how we are using community feedback and how it's being taken into account in the process that we're walking through. Let's see. Yeah, so just ways that we can also hear more from residents in the area.
Yeah, definitely. So this evening, seeing the chat is really helpful, and I think there's a lot of good input. Through the next month or so is when we're going to be collecting a lot of this input, both from things like this evening and other office hours and phone calls and things like that. We're logging all of that and really tracking what we're hearing. And in particular, I want to really emphasize that going and adding comments online onto the input tool will be a huge way for our team to use that. And because it's so geographically specific, it's helpful. So that's a great way for us to get that input. Then we're going to collect it all, review it, and then see if there are some things that need changing. And ultimately knowing that it's safety really has to be our #1 priority. And so, of course, we want to make as many changes as we can to meet needs. And ultimately, safety is also going to be one of those key needs that needs to be met. So after we gather all that input, make some edits to the design, and then we will be sharing what the revised design looks like later this summer and into early fall. And so by joining tonight and making sure that we have your email address, we can make sure that we are updating you on any project meetings or other ways to provide input.
Thanks, Geneva.
Yes, Steph, why don't we take a couple more? And I do want to reiterate to everyone that we are collecting all these questions. I saw a lot of good discussion and it all seemed really civil and constructive. So I really appreciate that. And I know we all have strong opinions and it's very personal. So please give us your feedback and we want to hear it. It's in a civil way. And for all the questions that we aren't able to get to tonight, we promise that we are collecting them all. We are going to create a questions and answers document that we'll post on the website several days after this meeting. Give us some time to sort of craft the responses and put the answers out there. So don't feel like we're just trying to ignore your question. We'll definitely get to it. So, okay, Steph, let's do a couple more if there are a couple more good ones.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so one question we received, there we are there more options to consider other than sharrows and protected lanes that Dottie installs? So Geneva, I think this question is for you and
Yeah, definitely. So yes, there are other options. Usually it's bike lanes or buffered bike lanes, protected bike lanes. In very rare instances, we can fund things like a shared use path, but that's really, really expensive and involves a great deal of construction and things like that. And the way that we tend to use, and our goal is to really make data-driven decisions. And so we take the input and the data that we receive about how a street is functioning. And by that, we're really looking at the speeds and volumes of car traffic. And then we can kind of say, okay, what makes the most sense, and how can we make sure that what we're putting down on the street makes is going to really meet the intention of building out a safe facility for people. And so when there are streets that are kind of lower volume, local streets like a Tennyson or a 7th, we can say really safely that would be a good opportunity for a neighborhood bikeway. And for other streets that have higher speeds and volumes, where we don't even have the width to do very much with that street, in those instances, then we say, okay, this will probably need to be a protected bike lane. And in all of those situations, we're also looking at things like how connected is that whole corridor? How many times are we asking someone to turn in order to access a bikeway? And of course, things like signalization is really key. How direct is something, and how well, for instance, does it provide a connection over 6th Avenue? How well does it provide a connection to parks and trails and schools? So all of those things are kind of part of the selection of both the corridor and the facility type.
Great, thank you, Geneva. And then I saw a couple questions that relate back to more of the protected bike lanes and some exceptions with bike lanes. So for example, there were questions about how delivery vehicles will be able to access the street, how street maintenance will be addressed, and like trash pickup. And then there was, I saw some question and comment in the chat about for people with disabilities, how can they maintain parking? So I know it's kind of a three-prong. I know some of those are maybe more Geneva wheelhouse, and then Chris, you could jump in as well.
Yes, I can jump in for that. So kind of what Steph was talking about is if someone has an existing mobility and Americans with Disability Act place and a designated parking spot in front of their home for that, we have made changes to the design where we are dropping the protection. It goes to a shared facility for a very, very short period. And that's what we have to do, because it's really important that we're still maintaining that access for people who have disabilities. And if someone thinks that is also for them, if you email us, we can get you in contact with how to apply for that kind of a permit. Generally, it means that you don't have a driveway or any kind of off-street parking. And if that's the case, then we will work on integrating that into our design as best we can. We understand that there are a lot of different needs on every street, and making sure that people who have disabilities can park in front of their homes is really important to us.
Hey, Geneva, let me
ahead.
add one thing to that, because I did see a little bit in the chat there. So just to be clear, it's not like a hang tag on your car that you would allow you to just park in the bike lane. It's a process with the city where we designate an actual space with signs in front of your property for you to park in. So I just wanted to be clear about that. I thought I saw some confusion there. Sorry to interrupt.
Great, thanks. So we did have a question earlier on in the chat about the timing for these projects. I think it was specifically about Perry, but we can talk about the timing for construction for all of the projects.
So we will be, can you hear me okay? Great. We will be working on finishing design and modifying concept designs, and then we advance into more final design by the end of the year. And the intention is to start construction on these in 2022. And I will also see if Michael Koslow, my colleague, has anything to add on that.
Thanks, Geneva. Yeah, just to know that these projects, when they get built, we have a hard time getting contractors interested in a little project when they're building huge malls and developments and freeways and stuff. So a lot of times the projects get glommed together with several other projects. So you might see that packaging occur towards the end of this year with some other projects in other parts of Denver.
Okay, great. I think Steph, that's a good time to kind of move on to the next piece. I know that there's a lot of questions I saw. I guess Geneva, when Geneva was answering, there were a couple more questions that we definitely want to get to in the question and answer document. So we will definitely get to those. But let's move on. We're getting near the end here, and I know it's a long meeting. I appreciate everyone's attention and participation. So thank you. So what are the next steps? This is kind of what Michael was alluding to part of. So we're the first thing is we take this community input and we take it seriously. I can't promise that we'll solve everyone's problems on everyone's request, but we are listening and we'll do our best with the to accommodate that input or to make adjustments while still maintaining safety. So just want to make that promise to everyone. So our design process, once we get through that input, we'll revise these concept designs and make them, make revisions, and then they'll move into a 60% next design step. So become more engineering at that point. So design engineers will take them and kind of firm up all the details and work through. We'll definitely have another public meeting at that phase, at that stage, to share where we are now and get any further refinement input from you, the community. We also are available. I know this format is a little challenging sometimes, and I really wish we could be in a room and have a discussion because it's really useful. But we have had good luck with registered neighborhood organization meetings, and we're meeting with Phillip Park neighborhood very soon. I can't remember the exact date. Maybe Steph, do you remember the exact date of that meeting?
31st.
Say that again?
31st of March.
March 31st. So we'll be at that meeting on March 31st. We did meet with the WeCan neighborhood organization a few weeks ago as well. Those are really good forums to have a much more personal discussion as a group and as a community. So please join us. Please let your RN know you'd like to have us speak if we aren't speaking already. But I think we're in pretty good shape, and we're really looking forward to meeting the Villa Park folks at their meeting. And we will have, like I said, another public meeting in the summer and fall. So be on the lookout for that. So I want to bookend this meeting with the information we started with. So we've gone through, we've shared the general ideas. We just don't have enough time to get into every single block and what's happening. But we have provided that information. We want you to look. We want you to give us specific comments. You do that at the bit.ly/WDSS comment address. That'll take you right to that site that Steph showed us in the beginning. You can get to our project website. You can also contact us by email at bikes@denvergov.org. If you add West Denver Safer Streets and the specific street to the subject line, that helps us be more responsive. You can also call our project hotline if you just want to leave us a voicemail and maybe get a call back. That's 720-865-WEST. We do monitor that pretty regularly. Takes a couple days for us to assign that to people and get back to people. So, but that's a good way to sort of get our attention and let us know what you think. Also, I kind of skipped this piece, but those office hours pieces are really good. They tend to be 1 to 3 people speaking with a project leader, and you can get much more specific information. You can sign up for those either at our comment website or at our project website. So that's great. If none of those work for you, we are committed to trying to make it as easy as possible. So just send us an email and say, hey, none of those office hours work for me. It doesn't work with my work schedule or whatever. We will set something up and get in touch with you. So just wanted to make that commitment to the community. I know that this is exciting, but it's also worrying, and change is tough. And that's why we're having this conversation. And want to thank everyone again for taking the time out of your busy schedule to spend with us. Really appreciate it. Know people are interested, and we are here to listen and do our best for you and to make West Denver a safer place to move around. So thank you, everyone, and I hope you have a great rest of your evening.